Welcome back to the Complete Spanish Grammar, Lesson 9.
On previous videos, we saw the present tense and also the future tense. On this video, we will be checking the conditional tense. Now, el tiempo condicional. What is el tiempo condicional? Well, if you remember, on the future tense, you had will, and then you have future, which is a future that has certainty. It's an event that most likely, let's say 99% of the time, is going to happen. Example, I will go to your party. Iré a tu fiesta. So there are highly chances, or really, really good chances, that I will go to your party. I will marry you. Me casaré contigo. So I gave you the ring, and basically, I'm going to marry you. So future gives you this certainty, whereas conditional, well, the conditional tense in English, would plus the verb, gives you a future idea, but with uncertainty. So it's an uncertain future. Chances are this is not going to happen, but chances are it will never happen, right? So I would go to your party, iría a tu fiesta, I would marry you, me casaría contigo. Keep in mind that the book, Complete Spanish Grammar, doesn't really follow a really good structure of presenting topics. That is why these two last example sentences don't really have the extra sentence, the ending of that idea. I would go to your party if something happened. I would marry you, but we don't really know the context. We don't really know why I wouldn't marry you. So let me explain how the would, the conditional tense, works, and then I would explain you what would be the optimum path to learn the conditional. If you know future, you know conditional. And that is a true statement. If you know how to conjugate the future tense in Spanish, you know the irregulars, you know how it's done, the endings, you pretty much know the conditional tense. They go hand by hand in the conjugation field. So let's see. You have regular verbs. Just like in future, you have AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs together. And when you have the future, you remember you don't really need to eliminate anything. You just need to add an ending. In the future, it was an E for the yo form, a S for the tú form, A for usted, él, or ella, hemos for nosotros, and an for ellos, ellas, and ustedes. Remember that you need to put these accent marks at the end of the words because the intonation is at the end. So you would say, yo hablaré, not yo hablaré or yo hablaré. No, it's yo hablaré. When it comes to the ER verbs or IR verbs, it's pretty much the same, right? In the future, you just put the same exact endings. Comeré, viviré. But what about the conditional? We said that future is pretty much a clone, pretty much the same as future. So instead of these endings that you originally have in future, you have to use these new ones. And these new ones are the ones for the conditional tense. It's an ia, ias, ia, iamos, and ian with their accent, and the accent marks the intonation. So instead of saying hablaré, I will speak, now you can say hablaría, I would speak. Hablarías, you would speak. Same happens for ER and IR verbs. Comería, I would eat in this case. The irregular ones are pretty much the same idea. You have tener, and then you have other four verbs that behave the same exact way as tener. So you have tener, you remove the E, you substitute it by a D, and instead of putting the E with the accent, as we had in future, tendré, I will have, you now put ia. So that would be tendría, I would have. Tendrías, you would have, tendría, tendríamos, and tendría. And the same happens for the same verbs that also fit in this category, just like in future. Poner would be pondría, I would put. Valer would be valdría, I would value. Remember, we don't really use valer in the yo form that often. We use it more in the he, she form for an object, like the iPhone would value, or the plural form, the iPhones would value. So valdrían o valdría, but not really much valdría as the yo form. Salir would be saldría, and venir, to come, vendría. Now, the second group of verbs, because remember, when you study future, we said that there are two groups, one commanded by tener and one commanded by poder. Poder follows also a specific structure. We saw it and we learned it in the future video. Poder, you have to remove the E, but unlike tener, where you substitute the E that you remove for a D, in poder, you just put together the remaining letters. So you end up with PODR, poder. But you need to add the endings. And in this case, because we are seeing actually the conditional tense, we would put ia. So podría, podrías, podría, podríamos, and podría. Just a quick note. Poder should be translated or interpreted as could, right? You have would with any other verb, but then you have podría that would mean could. So, for example, if I say I would eat, it would be just comer plus the ending comería. I would eat. But if in the case of poder, you would say I could eat. So in that case, it would be yo podría comer. So the ia, the conditional, goes attached to poder because that's the could, and then just throw the verb comer. Yo podría comer. I could eat. Caber is the very first verb, remember, of four, because poder is the leading one, and then you have four that actually follow poder construction. So caber, to fit, would be cabría. Remove the E, put together the remaining letters, and then you have cabría. I would fit. Saber, sabría, I would know. Querer, you have to roll the R for this one. It would have to be querría. And finally, haber, habría. Just like in future, I explained that haber is really used with the future tense to talk about the future perfect tense. I will have eaten. In this case, you use haber with habría. Let's see an example. En ese concierto habría más de 1,000 personas. Roughly translated this one, it would be something like, in that concert, there might have been more than 10,000 people. So remember, it's uncertainty. You don't really know, but judging by the amount of people, habría más de 10,000 personas. Not less, right? Not 9,000, but probably 12,000, but at least 10,000. Just like future, there are only three totally regular verbs. Luckily, just like future once again, conditional only will be using two, because the third one, nobody uses this one. It's really weird that a native uses this construction because the verb sounds off to our native ears. Even though it's the correct conjugation, we don't really use it. Let's see which ones are those. So the first one is decir. Just like future, you would say, I will say, diré. In decir, you would say, diría. Dirías, diría, diríamos, and dirían. Remember, the stem part is dir, and then you just add the ending, diría. Then you have hacer. Hacer is going to be just like future. Haré, I will do. You would say, I would do by putting the stem har and then adding the ending. Haría, harías. This one, we use it a lot because we use it in questions like, what would you do? ¿Qué harías? Right? The third verb, the one that you don't really need to learn, is satisfacer. The conjugation would be satisfaría, but nobody uses this construction because it sounds weird, right? It sounds odd. Even though you have satisfaría, it's not really used. Okay? Normally in my classes, I normally explain why this verb is not used, but for these videos, just ignore this part. Don't use this verb, satisfacer. Okay? So just stick to these two verbs,
And
decir
hacer.
and hacer. Let's see some example sentences. Iría a tu fiesta, pero estoy enfermo. I would go to your party, but I'm sick. Compraría un PlayStation 5, pero la tienda no tiene ninguno. I would buy a PS5, but the store has none. Podrías tocar el piano, pero nunca practicas. Remember, poder plus the conditional tense, it's translated into could. You could play the piano. In Spanish, we don't use the verb jugar to play instruments. We use the verb tocar to play instruments. So you could play the piano, but you never practice. Este collar valdría mucho, pero no es original. This necklace would cost a lot, but it's not an original. Remember, we don't really use valer for the yo form. We use it for items, things that have a price tag. Last one. ¿Qué diría tu abuelo en esta situación? What would your grandpa say in this situation? Now, all these sentences, you can use the conditional to express the idea. But in real practice, we don't really use them like this that much. But we use it with the subjunctive structures. So what about the subjunctive structures? You normally use the subjunctive plus the conditional in the if clauses. Yes, when you say like if something happens, then this would happen. The if clauses use the structures of if clauses, but also use the conditional in one or two of the clauses. So let's see. In English, you would say, if I were rich, that's correct. It's where. If I were rich, I would buy a car. Where, because you use the subjunctive in English, never if I was. But if I were rich, I would buy a car. This sentence in English is divided into two sections. You have the subjunctive clause, which is the if clause. You have the comma, and then you have the conditional tense. If I were rich, because in this series of videos, we haven't seen the subjunctive yet. We're not going to translate this part, if I were rich. We're only going to translate the conditional tense of the sentence. So, compraría un auto. So you see, you actually need the conditional to really use or take full advantage of the conditional tense. You need the subjunctive to use the conditional to its full potential. If I were rich, compraría un auto. I would buy a car. If the complete Spanish grammar book had a better structure, you would have learned the conditional tense along the subjunctive tense. And that would have been the optimum path, honestly. If the complete Spanish grammar book had a better structure, habrías aprendido el tiempo condicional junto con el tiempo subjuntivo. Habrías aprendido. You would have learned. Okay? Conversation time. Remember, we have the Spider-Man theme throughout these conversations. So, person A. First, it's going to be slowly, then a little bit fast, and finally with the English translations. So, ¿regresarías con Mary Jane? ¿Por qué haría eso? Hablé con ella y me dijo que ella quiere volver contigo. Volvería con ella. Pero, ¿qué hay de Spider-Man? Spider-Man puede salir de sus vidas. No los molestaría otra vez. Pero, ¿qué nos garantizaría eso? ¿Aceptarías ser parte de un experimento? Tendrías también superpoderes. ¿Podría derrotar a Spider-Man? ¿Podrías deshacerte de Spider-Man de una vez por todas? Let's read it with real pace. ¿Regresarías con Mary Jane? ¿Por qué haría eso? Hablé con ella y me dijo que ella quiere volver contigo. Volvería con ella, pero ¿qué hay de Spider-Man? Spider-Man puede salir de sus vidas. No los molestaría otra vez. Pero, ¿qué nos garantizaría eso? ¿Aceptarías ser parte de un experimento? Tendrías también superpoderes. ¿Podría derrotar a Spider-Man? ¿Podrías deshacerte de Spider-Man de una vez por todas? I would like to have those superpowers as well.
Start learning with a professional teacher. Classes are tailored according to your level. And your progress is important, so I keep track of how you're doing so you're always achieving more. Book a trial class and start your language journey now.
Let's see the translations. So, ¿regresarías con Mary Jane? Would you go back to be with Mary Jane? ¿Por qué haría eso? Why would I do that? Yeah, haría. Would do. Why would I do that? Hablé con ella y me dijo que ella quiere volver contigo. The blue letters are because they are in preterite. We study preterite in other videos. So if you don't know these verbs, go back, study those video, and then come back here. Hablé con ella y me dijo que ella quiere volver contigo. I spoke to her and she told me that she wants to go back to be with you. Volvería con ella, pero ¿qué hay de Spider-Man? I would be back to be with her, but what about Spider-Man? Spider-Man podría salir de sus vidas. Spider-Man could leave you alone. No los molestaría otra vez. He, we don't use the pronoun he in Spanish because it's already implied in the molestaría, the he form. He wouldn't bother you again. Remember, molestar in Spanish is a normal verb. It doesn't really have that awkward meaning that has in English. It means to bother. Pero, ¿qué nos garantizaría eso? But what would guarantee us that? ¿Aceptarías ser parte de un experimento? Would you accept to take part in an experiment? ¿Tendrías también superpoderes? You would have superpowers as well. ¿Podría derrotar a Spider-Man? Could I defeat Spider-Man? Notice that in Spanish, even though we don't use the pronouns when we're speaking that much, sometimes we use them, but sometimes, most of the time, we don't. It doesn't really get ambiguous. Is podría derrotar a Spider-Man, but based on the conversation, is I the one that could defeat Spider-Man, not someone else, not a he, not a she. That's why in English is needed because the verb doesn't really tell you who the doer or the subject is. But in Spanish, based on the conversation, we have context. So the sentence podría derrotar a Spider-Man means could I. Podrías deshacerte de Spider-Man de una vez por todas. You podrías, you could get rid of Spider-Man once and for all. Let's do some practice time. Try to answer these or translate these sentences into the comments sections, and I will be checking them and giving you a thumbs up or a heart if you did it perfectly. Try your best. If you make a mistake, don't worry. Just learn these structures. So first one, I would buy the car, but it is expensive. I would see the movie, but I'm afraid of E.T. He's ugly. He is ugly. She would love me, I am sure. And finally, she could be a great artist, but she doesn't practice. She could be. Remember, could is a different structure in the conditional tense. It uses the verb poder. It's not just podería. No, it's a different one. Okay? Type down your answers and give a thumbs up to this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want more videos. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.